Imagine waking up on a Sunday morning. The sun is shining, the birds are singing, and the smell of coffee fills your kitchen. It feels like any other lazy weekend, a moment of peace before the grind of Monday begins. But something is wrong. You pick up your phone to check the news, expecting the usual noise, political scandals, celebrity gossip, sports scores. Instead, every screen, every channel, every feed is screaming the same headline in bold, terrified letters. The president and the chairman of the Federal Reserve are standing behind a podium. They look grave, like undertakers at a funeral for a friend they secretly hated. They are announcing a new era of financial stability. And then they say the number. Yesterday, gold was trading at $3,000 an ounce. It was expensive, sure, but attainable. Today, by executive order, the price of gold has been fixed at $20,000. For a split second, your brain does a little victory dance. You think about that gold chain in your drawer, or maybe the few coins you bought years ago on a whim. You think, I'm rich. My assets just increased sevenfold overnight. You smile. You feel like a genius. But that smile is the smile of a man who sees a tsunami approaching and mistakes it for a really high tide that will make surfing fun. You don't understand what just happened. You are looking at the price tag, but you are missing the product. Gold didn't get more valuable. Gold is just a rock. It sits there. It doesn't change. It doesn't pay dividends. What happened is not a miracle of wealth creation. What happened is the murder of your money. When the government declares that gold is now worth $20,000, they are not lifting gold up. They are pushing the dollar down. They are admitting, officially and legally, that the paper currency in your wallet, the digits in your bank account, and the pension fund you have been slaving for are worth 7 times less than they were yesterday. It is a devaluation of biblical proportions. It is a confession that the currency has failed. This is not a market fluctuation. This is a surgical strike on the middle class. While you were sleeping, the rules of the game were rewritten. The money you saved for 10 years to buy a house, now it buys a garage. The college fund for your kids, now it buys a semester of textbooks. Your salary, which seemed decent on Friday, is now a poverty wage on Sunday. You rush to check your bank account. The numbers are still there, $100,000. It looks the same, but when you go to the online store to buy a laptop, the price isn't $1,000 anymore. It's $7,000. You go to the grocery delivery app. A loaf of bread isn't $5. It's $35. The illusion shatters. You realize that while the number of dollars you own hasn't changed, the dollar itself has become a ghost, a hollow shell. This is the night of the long knives for the currency. It is a quiet massacre. There are no soldiers in the streets, no tanks, no explosions, just a press conference and a signature on a piece of paper. But the devastation is total. Millions of lifetimes of labor, stored in paper currency, are vaporized in an instant. Why would they do this? Why would they nuke their own economy? Because they have no choice. The system is cornered. The national debt is a cancer that is metastasized to every organ of the state. $35 trillion. $50 trillion. It doesn't matter anymore. The interest payments alone are consuming the entire tax revenue. The government is broke. Mathematically, physically, undeniably broke. They can't pay it back. They can't default without destroying the world. So they choose the third option, the option they never talk about on the news. The option they call revaluation. By fixing the price of gold at $20,000, the Treasury's gold reserves suddenly become worth enough to cover the debt. On paper, the books are balanced. On paper, the government is solvent again. They wipe the slate clean, they save the system. But the cost of that salvation is your savings. They transfer the debt from their balance sheet to your living room. You pay for their mistakes. Not with taxes, which you can vote against, but with inflation, which is theft that happens in the dark. You look out the window, the street is quiet. People are walking their dogs. They haven't checked their phones yet. They don't know that they are poor. They don't know that the world they built yesterday is gone. You feel a cold pit in your stomach. You realize that you are witnessing the greatest wealth transfer in human history. And you are on the wrong side of the transaction. The elites knew. Of course they knew. That's why the billionaires have been selling stocks and buying land. That's why the central banks have been hoarding bullion like dragons. They weren't protecting themselves against a correction. They were building arks before the flood. They knew the dam was going to break, and they made sure they were standing on high ground when the water came crashing down. You are not on high ground. You are in the valley, and the water is rising fast. This scenario sounds like fiction, doesn't it? A conspiracy theory for paranoid survivalists. But history laughs at your skepticism. This has happened before. It happened in Rome. It happened in Weimar, Germany. It happened in America in 1933. The script is written. The actors are in place. The only variable is the date. And looking at the debt clock spinning out of control, that date is closer than you think. In the next block, we will open the dusty archives of history and look at the blueprints of this crime. We will see how Roosevelt did it and how the modern architects of financial ruin plan to do it again. Only this time, they won't just take your gold. They will take your future. You might think that the government wouldn't dare. You might cling to the naive belief that in a democracy, private property is sacred and your savings are untouchable. You tell yourself, this is America. They can't just change the value of money by decree. They can't just steal from the people. If you believe that, you don't know your history. The government not only can do it, they have done it. And they did it with a ruthlessness that would make a medieval king blush. Let's rewind the clock to 1933. The Great Depression is strangling the nation. Banks are collapsing like dominoes. People are starving. And in the White House sits Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He needs money. He needs to print dollars to fund his New Deal programs, to restart the economy. But his hands are tied. The dollar is pegged to gold. For every dollar he prints, he needs a specific amount of gold in the vault, and there isn't enough gold. So, what does he do? Does he cut spending? Does he raise taxes? No. He commits the greatest heist in American history. On April 5th, 1933, he signs Executive Order 6102. It sounds boring, doesn't it? Just another bureaucratic paper. But the text is terrifying. It forbids the hoarding of gold coin, gold bullion, and gold certificates within the continental United States. Think about that. The government made it illegal for you to own money, real money. They ordered every citizen to turn in their gold to the Federal Reserve. And the price? They paid you $20.67 per ounce. If you refused, you faced 10 years in prison and a $10,000 fine. That was a fortune back then. People were scared. They lined up at banks. They handed over their family heirlooms, their savings, their safety nets. They trusted their government. They thought it was a temporary measure to save the country. And then came the punchline, the cruel, cynical punchline. Once the government had collected all the gold, once the vaults were full and the citizens' hands were empty, Roosevelt signed another order in 1934, the Gold Reserve Act. With a stroke of a pen, he raised the official price of gold from $20.67 to $35 per ounce. Do you see the magic trick? Do you see the theft? The government took your gold for $20. Then, instantly, they declared it was worth $35. They made a profit of almost 70% on your wealth. They devalued the dollar by 40% overnight. They robbed the entire population to bail out the state. It was a transfer of wealth from the private citizen to the public treasury so massive, so brazen, that it saved the U.S. government from bankruptcy. And you, the citizen, were left holding paper dollars that bought 40% less than they did a year before. That was the Roosevelt Protocol. Confiscate cheap, revalue expensive, save the system, screw the people. Now, fast forward to 2025. The situation is eerily similar. The debt is unpayable. The economy is on life support. The printing press is the only thing keeping the heart beating. The elites are looking for an exit strategy, and they are dusting off the old playbooks. They are looking at 1933 and thinking, it worked then, why not now? But there is a catch. They can't send soldiers to search your house for gold coins anymore. It's too messy. There are too many guns in America. It would start a civil war. And they can't confiscate crypto by kicking down doors, because your Bitcoin is just a string of numbers in your head or on a USB drive. So the new confiscation will be different. It will be digital. It will be clean. It will be bureaucratic. Instead of banning gold, they will simply tax windfall profits. Imagine this. Gold hits $20,000. You go to sell your ounce. The government says, congratulations on your profit. But since this gain is due to currency revaluation and not your hard work, we are applying a 90% national stabilization tax. You sell for $20,000, but you keep only $2,000. The rest goes to the state. It's confiscation without the bad PR of police raids. Or look at the ETFs. Most people don't own physical gold. They own paper shares in a gold fund like GLD. The government can simply nationalize the fund. For national security reasons, the Federal Reserve is acquiring all gold held by ETFs at the fair market price of yesterday. They take the metal, you get the cash, and then the next day they revalue the metal. Your cash is trash. Their vault is full. The mechanism has become more sophisticated, but the core principle remains unchanged. The government always plays with a marked deck. When the game gets too hard for them, they don't play better. They flip the table. They change the rules. You're sitting at that table right now. You're looking at your cards, your savings, your pension, your investments. You think you have a winning hand. But the dealer is Roosevelt's ghost, and he is reaching for the executive order. The blueprint is on the desk. The ink is wet. And the only question is, will you be the one handing over your gold for pennies, or will you be the one who saw the con coming and walked away before the trap snapped shut? In the next block, we will do the math. The cold, hard, terrifying math that proves why $20,000 per ounce isn't a wild guess. It's a necessity. It's the only number that solves the equation of the American apocalypse. Let's put aside the history books and the emotional speeches. Let's forget about fairness, morality, or political promises. Let's look at the only thing that cannot lie, the math. The United States financial system is not a political problem anymore. It is an arithmetic problem. And the equation is terrifyingly simple. It is an equation that ends in only one of two ways: total collapse or radical revaluation. Here are the numbers. They are cold, they are hard, and they don't care about your feelings. The U.S. national debt has crossed $35 trillion. That number is too big for the human brain to comprehend. Let me put it in perspective. If you spent $1 million every single day since Jesus was born, you would not have spent even $1 trillion by now. The U.S. owes 35 times that amount, and it is growing. Every 100 days, another trillion is added to the pile. This debt cannot be paid back, not with taxes. Even if you taxed every American at 100%, took every penny they earned, it wouldn't be enough to pay off the principal. Not with growth. The economy would have to grow at double-digit rates for decades, which is physically impossible. So the debt is a black hole. It is sucking the life out of the economy. The interest payments on this debt have now exceeded the entire defense budget. Think about that. America spends more on paying interest to bondholders than it spends on its Army, Navy, and Air Force combined. The superpower is becoming a subprime borrower. There's only one exit door. The gold exit. The United States Treasury claims to hold roughly 8,133 tons of gold. That is about 261 million ounces. It sits in Fort Knox, West Point, and the vaults of the New York Fed, allegedly. Right now, at current market prices, that gold is worth about $500 billion. $500 billion. Against $35 trillion in debt. It's a drop in the bucket. It's a rounding error. But what if the price of gold changed? What if the Federal Reserve decided to back the dollar with gold again, even partially, to restore confidence, to stop the world from dumping the dollar? To do that, the value of the gold in the vaults must equal the value of the dollars in circulation. Let's do the math. This is the shadow gold price. Take the M2 money supply, the amount of cash and checking deposits circulating in the economy. It's roughly $21 trillion. Divide that by the 261 million ounces of gold the U.S. owns. 21 trillion divided by 261 million. The calculator spits out a number. It's not 2,000. It's not 3,000. It is roughly $80,000 per ounce. $80,000. That is the price gold needs to be for the U.S. dollar to be fully backed by gold at current money supply levels. If we only back it by 40%, which was the standard required by law before 1945, the price drops to around $32,000 per ounce. Even with the most conservative estimates covering just the monetary base, cash plus bank reserves, we land in the territory of $15,000 to $20,000 per ounce. Do you see now? $20,000 isn't a random number I pulled out of a hat to scare you. It isn't a fantasy of some gold bug living in a bunker. It is the mathematical floor. It is the minimum price required to balance the books of the United States of America without defaulting. The system has painted itself into a corner. They have printed so many dollars that the only way to make those dollars credible again is to revalue the only real asset they have left. They have to mark up their gold to match their debt. This is the nuclear option of finance. It resets the balance sheet. Overnight, the Treasury's gold becomes worth trillions. The debt to GDP ratio drops. The solvency crisis is solved, because if gold goes to $20,000, it means the dollar has collapsed. It means your salary buys 10% of what it used to. It means imported goods, electronics, clothes, coffee, oil, skyrocket in price. It means hyperinflation is not a risk. It is a policy choice. They will call it stabilization. They will say it's necessary to save the economy from speculators. But the math tells the truth. They are diluting your labor to pay for their excess. They are burning your savings to keep the lights on in Washington. This is the inevitability of the math. You can't cheat gravity forever. You can't print wealth forever. Eventually, the paper money has to return to its intrinsic value. And for the US dollar, looking at that 35 trillion debt mountain, that value is approaching zero faster than anyone dares to admit. The timer is ticking. It's strapped to the dynamite under the foundation of the Federal Reserve. And the fuse is burning short. In the final block, we will look at the aftermath. What does the world look like the morning after the revaluation? And how do you survive in a new feudalism where cash is trash and assets are king?